Thousands of investigation files on the activities of American financier Jeffrey Epstein have been made public in recent weeks. That's 7 years after Epstein's death, while serving a jail sentence as a convicted sex offender in the year 2019. The released travelogues, recordings, and emails seem to paint a detailed picture of a ring trafficking minors. They involve prominent figures and names in U.S. business, politics, including former British loyalty as well. On the latest development of the Epstein case, let's loop in our panelists. In Tampa, Florida, Jim Rossi, former Assistant United States Attorney from the Department of Justice. In Sydney, John Keane, Professor of Politics with University of Sydney. In Beijing, Rong Ying, Senior Research Fellow from China Institute of International Studies. Thank you so much for all of you joining us. Mr. Rossi, now, how much do we know about exactly what Epstein did? Now, we know 2008, 2019, these two different timings in terms of trying to describe the crimes he has committed. But now we see a lot of mysteries and controversies. How much do we know about the crimes he did throughout his life?
Well, I think what you see with the production of the documents, the 50% that they have produced, and they still haven't produced 50% more. What you see is over many years and 2 decades, Jeffrey Epstein had a scheme with Ghislaine Maxwell and others to traffic in young females under 16, some as young as 13, and they would exploit and use and terrorize these young girls into performing certain acts on adult men. And that was a scheme that started way back in the 90s and continued up until probably 2019. And then he was charged by the federal court in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York City. So what evidence do we have? We have the disclosure of the documents that there was a lot of communications with these unnamed men. And there was a lot of communication between Ghislaine Maxwell and some of the females that were involved in this conspiracy. So that's the evidence.
How much a fine line shall we draw between conspiracies, suspicions, and fact-based, evidence-based conclusions at this moment?
Based on the production of documents to date, videos, emails, and other documents, we have a lot of suspicions, as you say, speculation. As a former prosecutor, to bring a case of conspiracy against any of the individuals who may be involved that have not been released, you need a lot more evidence today to charge anybody. The second thing I want to point out is a lot of the activity is very old. It's over 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old. And in the federal system in the United States, you can't charge somebody based on an old crime unless it's murder or something like that. But for sex trafficking, if you go beyond 5 years, you can't bring any charges. But to answer your question, based on what is produced, we have a lot of suspicions, we have a lot of speculation, but we don't yet have hardcore evidence, solid evidence to bring charges.
On the other hand, we have already seen the courts have ordered the release of additional grand jury materials and transcripts, including the cases involving Epstein in earlier cases, as we mentioned, 2008, 2019. Meanwhile, we also see that the court has ordered his longtime associate to testify, and yet the latter has refused at this moment so far. So how much the difficulties and challenges as a result are we seeing, Mr. Keane, in the investigation of Epstein's related crimes. We are just talking about this individual first before we go to others who have been, in one way or another, associated with him throughout the years. Mr. Keane.
The difficulty is to piece together particular documents, and we are aware that there are already restrictions on what can be released, heavily redacted names, for example, which I hope the American Congress begins to name the names of men whose names have been redacted. We know as well that the names of survivors, for example, of the sex trafficking crimes, are not fully available. There are restrictions on national security. Any material on harm to children, for example, is also prohibited. But it does seem to me what is also important is to try to make a kind of comprehensive sense of what all of these documents, only 50% of which we have, many of them heavily redacted. What do these documents tell us about politics in the United States? And if I may, very briefly, I would like to say that what's presented is something like a picture of an Epstein ruling class. It's a shocking phrase. It's a group of moneyed and very powerful people who network very closely. It is a bipartisan matter. It's not a question of Republicans versus Democrats. There are diplomats, there are professors. This is a jet set whose pheromones, so to say, are activated by knowing the whereabouts of various people. It is a ruthless group. It wants edge. The moneyed want to know what the intellects are saying, and the intellects need, of course, money. They have their disagreements as a group. They are nihilists in the sense that they're not at all moral. You know, Kenneth Starr, who was the great prosecutor of Bill Clinton, turns out to be actually an ally of Jeffrey Epstein. And so it goes on. What happens legally next will be shaped by the political meaning and the ethical meaning of this entangled large group of principally men who are corrupt to the bones. This is the point. And one could say that this is what happens after 40 years of what has been called neoliberalism. When you privatize, marketize everything, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, this class came out on top. And it's not a very pretty picture.
We see also other complexities, because right now we see the DOJ and also the US Congress on documents, whether to release or not, what to release, names or not, what is the nature of the whole thing, investigation, have very different views. How do you see the relations between the two at this moment being played out in terms of impacting the nature of investigation and the capabilities of investigation about Epstein, this person himself, and what he exactly did?
Right now, you have two entities that are fighting each other. The Congress wants, for the benefit of the victims, and this is a very good question, Congress wants, for the benefit of the victims, full disclosure with limitations of those individuals who were discovered to have participated or associated with Mr. Epstein at his island, his home, or wherever they were having this conspiracy. And then you have the Department of Justice, which is fueled by the interest of Donald Trump, acting through his attorney general. They're fighting the full disclosure. And the major reason, I think, is that there are names in those files that have yet to be disclosed and that are in the redacted version that have been disclosed. There are names that they don't want revealed because it could be embarrassing to the administration or to the individuals who are listed in those documents. So you have this tension between Congress's right to pass a statute for full disclosure and the Department of Justice, which is fighting tooth and nail to prevent full disclosure. And how is this going to be resolved? It'll probably end up in the courts, and you may have contempt proceedings. You may have impeachment proceedings. It's going to be a hot mess, a hot mess.
And of course, this year is the political year for midterm election in the United States. But I heard you very clearly, Mr. Keene, that it's not just about Republicans versus Democrats. It's a lot of things going on at the moment. So whether this investigation can be fairly done, are you confident about that as an observer?
Not especially, I have to say, because, again, the bigger picture is important here. One of the consequences of the two Trump administrations already is the taming of the judiciary, the politicization of the Department of Justice, for example, and the quiescence of the Congress. One question that has been on my mind for some time is why Trump, initially prevaricating in the release of these documents, actually supported their partial release. And I think that, he's a very clever political animal. It's what the Germans would call a wooden duck strategy. You allow up to several million documents to be put out there and to be widely discussed and globally discussed. It takes the heat off him. And it helps him in his strategy of what I call weaponized nonsense. Trump says many things that don't make sense, and this is part of a broader strategy. So politically, how this will pan out in the midterm elections is unclear, or so it seems to me.
Adding another layer of complexity, Mr. Rossi, we have seen some of the names being mentioned in the documents being released. Now, I don't know how authentic these documents are, whether the documents could really prove one thing or another, but certainly some of the names we've already seen goes beyond the United States, which means there's another layer of geopolitics and the U.S. relations with all these people where they're coming from originally. How do you see this layer adding up to the overall myth, controversy, conspiracies, rhetorics, political fights, and even geopolitical fights?
I think there are a lot of individuals in many countries throughout the world, England, you name it. There are individuals who are alive today who are praying that their name is not going to be revealed in the documents that have been redacted or in the 50% that has not. And it goes to what Mr. Keene said. Mr. Epstein, back in the 80s, was a con artist, a fraudster extraordinaire. And he used his money to make contacts with everybody in many countries. And he invited him to his island, he invited him to participate in what he had a predilection for. So it's not just Prince Andrew. There are many other politicians in many countries and public figures or businessmen who may be in those files, and they're praying that their names are not going to be revealed.
Mr. Rossi, once again, back to you. How much do you think in the public sphere, besides the anger, clear line is being marked by what is evidence, what is emotion, what is sentiments, and what is the real investigation of the crimes? How much of attention is being put on sentiments and emotions? How much really efforts is there for the real investigation and finding out the details the facts related to people's suspicions?
We have conduct that is many, many, many years old, and it's conduct that is affiliated with certain individuals, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and all these conspirators who are in these draft indictments. But we have to be careful. The law in the United States imposes a statute of limitations. You have to bring charges within a certain time. If I rob a bank today in the United States, I have to be charged in 5 years. If I commit drug trafficking, if I sell drugs, I have to be charged within 5 years. So there are a lot of crimes that have been committed possibly in this whole affair, but they may be too old to charge. What do the victims want? They want political leaders to reveal conduct that should have been investigated and charged years ago. That's their main goal here, is to just have the public realize that these victims, their voices were not heard. Their voices were ignored. They're entreaties to the police and law enforcement. They were discounted. They just want to be heard. They know that the charges may be too old, but they want the public to know this should never happen again. We should never allow or condone a Jeffrey Epstein type person to do what he did. That's the goal of the victims, in my view.
Now, Mr. Keene, knowing what we know today so far, how much do you think, since you talk about journalism a lot, that journalism is also responsible for letting the public trying to identify the most important stories among all? How much do you think journalism and others in the society should help the public to realize this? And of course, as a result, putting pressure on the justice system and also the political system to react to the problems.
What we're witnessing, it seems to me, is a whole episode of revelations, thanks to both official platforms, but also social media platforms that do investigate. What's being revealed is this these symptoms of the decline of empire. It's very disturbing, and of course, the victims of the 1,000 or so women and girls who were victims of the Epstein racketeering and Ghislaine Maxwell's racketeering. Of course, their voices must be heard. But there's a more serious matter here about what these documents tell us, it seems to me, about the decline of American democracy and its commitment to accountable representative power. What we see from these documents is that journalism badly let down the citizens of the United States and other countries.
Mr. Rong, how do you as an observer, looking at what is going on over there, what is your takeaway?
Simply, you can put it as a kind of money, power, and corruption. So following the case, the Epstein case like that, certainly resonate a lot for Chinese and for me personally, that why that happened. And you can definitely, I think, have different, so draw a lot of conclusions. But the most and important for me conclusion is the system, the institution, it seems that are not working as effectively or efficiently as we believed. The scales and the scope of this case and the ways that has been revealed and under investigation is very much complicated. Of course, as the co-panelists have been debating, it can argue in a legal way, it can argue in a political way. But for me, is of course, it's very much related to the sort of the debate or the tension, how the tension
Right.
between the legal argument and the political argument is going to be worked out. And so far, I think I'm not a kind of a conspiracy buyer, but I would very much interested to see that what would be coming out. This last the point is that I'm very much dismayed and disturbed by the facts, by the evidence that have been revealed. So this is really, I
Right.
think, more than a kind of a case of scandal. It's really a touch upon the root causes of the system: legal, political, moral, and social.
Yeah, I guess Mr. Rong is one of those very typical observers from outside the United States looking at what is going on, the difficulties of investigation, the difficulties of revealing the information, the protection of those who are, the victims in the already known crimes. And the politics involved here, how do all of these wave together? What have we known so far about what needs to be changed or improved or altered in the system, so to speak?
I worked for the U.S. Department of Justice for almost 30 years. I worked under 10 attorney generals. The president appoints the attorney general with the blessing of the Senate. But once that attorney general is appointed, she or he needs to act independently. There should be a wall between the activities of the U.S. Justice Department and the White House and the House and the Senate. And the reason for this is when you apply the law to the facts as a prosecutor, and I did that for almost 3 decades, you have to do it without any fear or favor. You have to do it without any bias or prejudice. And you just have to call it like an umpire in a baseball game. And that is the bedrock. That is the bedrock that is our judicial and legal system. And the sad part today, as I speak on this panel, is that I cannot say that the Department of Justice is prosecuting or investigating individuals without bias or prejudice. It's gone off the rails. It's lost its moral compass, and it's very sad.
Now, Mr. Keene, on the other hand, what do you think are some of the major institutional takeaways so far we could have out of the evidence or facts that the public have seen?
How to build institutions politically. This will that prevent organized lying, led by the master liar who, Epstein took credit for the fact that the sun rises every morning. How to build institutions. I call this kind of democracy the need for a much stronger form of monitory democracy. Mr. Rossi is right, an independent Department of Justice, investigative journalism, a Congress, a parliament that stands up to the executive. I'm afraid that one of the lessons of these documents so far is the extent to which the Democrat-Republican divide has been corrupted, and the task of politically rebuilding governments at all levels that are honest, that do not lie, where representatives have the courage to admit that they are wrong and that they will change tack, that they don't engage in weaponized nonsense. I mean, all of this will take time. And it seems to me this is the major lesson, political lesson of the Epstein files. What is needed is the monitoring, the active monitoring, active forms of rendering power accountable so that, as the famous Jewish Dutch philosopher Spinoza said, the powerful learn that they are not able to make a table eat grass.
Thank you for that quote. Mr. Rong, your final takeaway. What do you think are some of the institutional problems clearly shown so far already?
I would add one more. Possibly we can look at the social aspect where I think these personalities that are being involved tells or reveals that an area which we have not been should be do more. I mean, as the Chinese say, never late to mend. That since they are public, a lot of them, I mean, those implicated or those that are being, revealed, a lot of them are public figures. So being public figures, they're supposed to have a higher moral sort of standard. So the code of conduct receiving, these treatment or doing in a way like what that being revealed in the Epstein case is not, politically unacceptable, but morally and socially unacceptable.